Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. When we last spoke on Monday, we talked about how in 2006 I found out that I'm HIV positive. It seems strange to say this, but I was very lucky. My doctor at the time, my primary care physician in the US, or GP, general practitioner in the UK, was somebody I was familiar with. He'd been my doctor for a couple years, we had a good doctor-patient relationship, and I trusted him. And he was also familiar with HIV. He was involved with a service organization in Chicago called Howard Brown. In fact, he was later the medical director. He had a number of patients who were HIV positive we'd had to break this news to before. So he'd been able to pick things up from experience to know what he needed to do to make this adjustment period as streamless as possible for me. And I'd like to share a few of those things he said and did in those first few days and months. The first thing is, in the US and in the UK, a typical doctor visit usually only amounts to 10 to 15 minutes of actual face time with the doctor. The doctor has a number of patients they need to see during the day. There's lots of demands for their time. There's paperwork and records they need to fill out, and all sorts of things. But at the same time, this kind of doctor appointment wasn't a normal doctor appointment. He was giving me possibly life-altering news. And so he did take the extra time I needed to understand the situation and put it into perspective. The second thing he did was something that he emphasized, and that is that the treatment of HIV had progressed, that if I took care of myself, HIV was no longer a death sentence. The way he put it was, Edward, HIV is not what's going to be what kills you. Someday, when you're in your 60s, you're going to step off the curb and get hit by a bus. That's what's going to kill you. Which seems strangely specific, but it did put it in perspective, and it has stuck with me for all these years. Next, he made sure that I did not go immediately home alone. As I mentioned before, he was affiliated with Howard Brown in Chicago. And before I'd even arrived at his office, he had called over to that organization and asked somebody to stay late so they could talk to me. Now, I didn't want to talk to anyone. I wanted to go back to my crappy little apartment, sit alone in the dark, and feel sorry for myself. He didn't let me. And to do that, he used guilt and said, this guy stayed late after work. It was after 5 o'clock by now. This guy stayed late from work so he can talk to you, so you should really go talk to him just for a few minutes. Now, my mother has endowed me with a fine sense of guilt. So hearing this, I felt I couldn't make him have sat in the office for no reason, so I said, fine, I'll go see him. And I can be very stubborn, so I don't like admitting this, but it was very helpful. The counselor and I discussed why I had put myself in situations where I was exposed to HIV. And because I did find it helpful, I ended up going to 2 separate support groups and seeking some counseling one-on-one with another counselor. And this brings us to the next thing my doctor did. You notice he didn't do this himself. He wasn't that emotional support person himself. My doctor understood his limits. He understood that he did not have the time, the resources, or really the training to be that emotional crutch I needed at that moment. But because of that, he had made arrangements, even before I arrived at his office, for someone to be available to be that emotional crutch. I have enormous respect for doctors and the rest of the medical community. I understand how impossible their jobs must be. And so I appreciate the fact that although he couldn't be that person himself, he had built the professional relationships to ensure his patients could get that support. But the single most important thing he taught me is that healthcare is a partnership, not a dictatorship. The doctor, of course, is the medical expert. He can provide options. He can review pros and cons of different treatments and courses of action. If you have a family or friends, they can be emotional support as part of this partnership. Service organizations can also offer support, as well as insights from their own experiences in dealing with that medical condition. But no matter how vital the doctor is, the family is, friends are, and the service organizations are in this partnership, it is the patient that must be the senior partner or CEO. Because only when the patient takes ownership and accountability for their own health and healthcare can the best outcomes be obtained. So that was the thought I wanted to share today, and I hope you found some value in that, regardless of your situation. If so, or if you think someone else might, please like, comment, subscribe, and share the video. I would be extremely remiss if I didn't take a moment to say thank you to all those who've been part of my partnership over the years. In Chicago, the Triad Health Practice, now Aris Health, Howard Brown Health Center, and Test Positive Aware Network, or TPAN. In Baltimore, Maryland, Chase Brexton Healthcare. In Washington, D.C., Whitman Walker Health. In Manchester, England, North Manchester General, Fairfax Group Practice, and George House Trust, where I currently volunteer. Additionally, friends like Addison, my daughter Moira, and last, but most definitely not least, my husband. And if you don't mind my saying so, be good. And if you can't be good, be wicked well.